start, I believe the writing was always on the wall. It was pretty clear what might have happened to Enock Mpianzi. We finally received the kind of confirmation to an intuition many South Africans had at the first moment the story surfaced. Now that all the details have been laid out in the ways they have, let me get a sense of your reaction to the full picture as it stands.
I'm emotionally drained, to be quite frank. When we took the report to the family yesterday, you will recall I was the person that was assigned to notify the family when the body was found in the river. So when we took the report yesterday, I just saw a similar reaction from the family. And I thought instead of healing the wound, we opened that wound again. And it was very, very difficult even to sit in other meetings where we're briefing the SGB, the school management and the parents, because we're relieving a pain that it's so difficult to manage and to handle. But also it was a report that, to be quite frank, make the entire education sector to be ashamed of, because the findings are damning. Lots and lots of things that we don't have to condone. For example, how do you take children to a camp that does not have life jackets? I mean, the camp only had 12 life jackets, we have 200 kids. How do you take children to a trip that is not authorized? Thirdly, how do you allow educators who are supposed to support and monitor and oversee the children that they're not there when they're needed? And how to have a leadership of the school through the principal who felt that the trip needed to go ahead regardless that there was no authorization, including the SGB. But how do you go to a camp that there were 4 deaths before and you were not aware? And you just take children there, and then we're lucky. Let me be honest with you, we're lucky that only Enock unfortunately died, but the situation could have been dire.
Yeah, I mean, you ask very critical questions, and another question is also, how did this happen, under your watch, right? So the education department itself has been implicated in some of the,
No, definitely. That's what I'm saying. We're ashamed, to be quite frank. We're embarrassed. The reason it happened is because, under our watch, is because we didn't authorize it. If we authorize it, definitely we have to take the blame as well as a department. But you can't say because it was not authorized and therefore you can't take any form of liability. We are not immune, and that is why the report says that we need to be subjected through a process, and that's the process that we'll find ourselves in. And that is why I've taken action against the district officials, and that's why we're taking action against the educators. We are not immune as a sector. You are right.
I understand that, Parktown Boys has also applied to undertake another trip, this time to countries that might actually be at risk of a coronavirus outbreak. I mean, take us through how you're handling that.
It's an indication that you don't care. Honestly. The school is in the middle of a forensic report. They make an application. They use the same method, and they want the department to approve it. I mean, how do you take children to a coronavirus-infected countries and say it's a cultural exchange? And it's scheduled for a few weeks' time. So, if you say we need to learn out of this, it's quite clear that the school have not learned. They just feel that this is a nuisance. We are focusing on things that we're not supposed to focus. Actually, one member of the SGB said in front of me to say, MEC, your Enock Mpianzi has been at our school for 2 days. There are 900 children that we must concentrate on, rather than concentrate on this one. In the parents' meeting, some parents said, we are damaging the brand of the school. And why can't this action against educators and the principal be suspended until the end of the year so that their children must write examination? So if you have that kind of an attitude, it's very, very difficult to say we have learned. And that is why I'm saying we're embarrassed. We're in a state of shock. We're emotionally drained. But most importantly, unfortunately, we have to act, and we'll do that.
And we'll talk about that action in just a moment. What this moment has certainly done, though, is certainly unearthed many underlying issues in the ways in which schools in the province are being run. MEC, I'm sure you'll agree, this was the most basic of stuff that wasn't done. Making sure you're able to account for all the learners at the school, the life trackers that you've been able to allude to at the start of this interview. Just very basic oversight issues. I mean, does it raise concerns to you about how other schools in the province are undertaking things like orientation camps, if not other more dangerous activities?
I think when you use basic, actually, you're being respectful. Amateurish. Because the roll call of the learners that went to camp, someone forgot it in the bus that was going back to Johannesburg. And in the world of technology, if you call the bus driver, you can just say, bus driver, at least take a photo of the roll call and WhatsApp it back to us. We can use it. So they had to use the roll call of all learners that enrolled for grade 8, not the learners that went to the camp. So on the basis of that, they missed the search by 18 hours. So if they had the proper roll call, the search would have resumed 18 hours earlier. We're not saying we should have saved his life or what, but at least 18 hours would have given us an opportunity to know that something is wrong.
That could have made the difference.
That I'm saying a major difference.
Yeah.
Just because someone forgot the roll call or documents in the car, and the car refused to come back, and they had to rely on the entire attendance register of all learners. And just because there were 11 learners that didn't want to go to the camp, and when they got the list, 11 learners were missing. They just said it's the same learners that didn't want to come to the camp, only to find that when they called Enoch's father, there was an indication that Enoch was at the camp. So when you say it's basic thing, I think you're being respectful. It's just amateurish, and people must suffer the consequences of their actions.
And so it certainly brings us to asking the question about the lessons learned, right? Because here we are, sadly, reflecting on what we think was, amateurish type procedures that were overlooked, to use your words. What lessons is the Gauteng Education Department taking from this, and what is going to be the treatment of orientation camps within schools moving forward?
I wish I can say there are lessons. As I said, we have this case of the trip. There are schools that it's just business as usual, that are sending their application. So we just have to have a review committee to review everything. One is OTA-related activities. Two is the consent forms. That within the consent forms, the school must declare that they've went to the site, they've checked the site, and all regulatory matters have been met. So we're putting all new systems to ensure that this kind of events doesn't reoccur, or we don't find ourselves in a situation where we have to account again.
Now, of course, as I mentioned, the report certainly implicates the department as well. What kind of recourse legally are you expecting from the Mpianzi family and their attorneys?
Well, we are open-minded. I told our legal team, don't be defensive for the sake of defending. We are open-minded. We've established a negotiating team. So by the time the legal team of the family approaches us, we'll be ready to settle as quickly as possible, as long as the amount that is presented on the table is reasonable. And what is a reasonable amount, MEC? I don't want to put amount to a life of a person. But
that's why I'm asking the question.
But litigations end where people request an amount of money. So that's how it is. So let's wait for that process. But to us, we'll continue to provide all the relevant support that is needed.
Okay, there's also the reality of, having to maintain some kind of stability at Parktown Boys School as you try to deal with this issue, and rightly so. My understanding is that several teachers, about 5, have been implicated in this. Yeah. They're going to be suspended, according to your word. What plans are there to ensure that, the gap that's going to be left by those teachers is at least not one that creates even more instability at that school?
Now, our approach is that the school must not be worse off, which simply means that in the absence of the principal, there must be somebody acting. In the absence of these teachers, if we take that kind of an action, or if the SGB takes that kind of an action, we'll ensure that there are replacement teachers to assist our learners.
Yeah. Now, this moment is something that you've mulled over for quite some time, I imagine. Can you outline to us 3, say, of your most urgent priorities moving forward? You know, if you as a department were given the scope, the resources, the time to be able to focus on 3 main things moving forward, what would those things be?
Well, as a review of school trips, I really feel that, unfortunately, there have been an invasion by private sector interests in these trips, and therefore people are not using the trips for educational purpose, but they're using them for profiting. So we need to arrest that situation as quickly as possible. And secondly, I think we need to workshop our SGBs. They must know the do's and don'ts, what are the things that they can do, and what are the things that they can't do. I don't want to assume that they don't know anything, but this case has exposed us badly, and therefore we can't leave it lying. And lastly is the role of our educators. Remember, they are parents when they are not parents, so they must understand that when we have 200 learners assigned to them, those learners must be protected, all of them, and you don't have to rely on other people. So those are the 3 things on the basis of this matter that one will prioritize and ensure that there's appropriate change of attitude, but most importantly, regulations that manage this kind of trips.
Now, there are also questions that we see around, 2 forensic reports, I understand, which were released looking into orientation camps themselves. They had recommended that those camps be scrapped. That clearly didn't happen. Tell us why, and speak to those issues around what some people perceive to be, again, a moment of neglect on your part.
That is why we're going to the SGB. Because the SGB yesterday, when we presented that argument, they said, no, we didn't know the report, we didn't receive the report, whereas it's me who presented that report to them. Because it's a culture in the department. When we release a report, we don't want to just give you a report, assuming that we'll read it. We take you through the report, so that even if you don't read it, at least you know that we've taken through the report. So when we presented that argument to the SGB yesterday, they said no, but the department didn't give us the report. And I indicated that I gave you that report, so you can't claim that you didn't know the content of that particular report. And that's the reason why in this report the SGB is found to be liable for not scrapping those camps, and we are taking action against the SGB.
But did you follow up with the school before the Enock Mpianzi? Because I understand the report states as back as about 2016, 2017 or so. To wait for January 2019 to start asking questions about that report might be remiss, according to some people.
No, it's them that are asking. We have acted against on the recommendations that were directed at us as a department. For example, we're directed to appoint a new principal. We appointed a new principal. We're directed to change the head of the boarding school. We changed the head of the boarding school. We're directed to fire the educators that were implicated. All the educators that were implicated, we fired them. We're directed to introduce a new code of conduct. That new code of conduct was introduced. Is the element that were directed at the SGB to say, don't continue with this camp, that we handed over to the SGB, and the SGB ignored that, and that's the reason why yesterday they said that they were not aware that they needed to act, and therefore the report is right in implicating them, and therefore we have to take an action against them. But whatever that was expected of us as a department, we have executed literally all those recommendations.
And would it not be in your purview to ensure that they enforce, parts that are, facing them? Would it be not the responsibility of the Housing Education Department to see through all the recommendations, even those that don't necessarily, call you into action per se, but, sort of call people under you to act?
It's a grey line, because, remember, SGBs don't account to me. They govern on their own, and they have the right to appoint lawyers. Actually, they've appointed a lawyer to tackle the department on the basis of these recommendations. So it's a thin line where you can't just go to an SGB and say, do this, because they're not your children. They don't report to you. They don't account to you. So they're an independent body, and they've got legislative powers to do all these things. So what they've not done is found in the current report to be a negligent aspect, and the department has been directed to act, and it's on that basis that we're meeting them so that we can tell them that we're going to act against them.
All right. Now, you know, this has understandably caused a whole lot of concern for parents in particular. Many of those, you know, have voiced their concerns to you from yesterday. Take us through some of your plans to try and ensure that, you know, parents continue trusting the department, because that's crucial, if not central, to the ability of your office to do its work.
You are correct. I mean, I don't want to sound not appreciating the role that we're playing as a department. I mean, we've got 2.3 million learners coming to our schools daily. Of the 2.3 million learners and almost 180,000 educators, you can see there's commitment to teach our children, there's commitment for our children to learn, and to create an environment that is conducive for learning and teaching. But unfortunately, some of these things happen. And our commitment is to say where they happen, we will act. And I think we've demonstrated with this particular activity. I had to go to 27 families since June 15 to personally speak to those families, because their children or their educators have passed on. And some are things beyond our control. I mean, the latest learner that passed on Friday was struck by lightning. But we take responsibility as a department, because that was a learner that was part of our school population. So I commit to parents on behalf of the department, and I know I've addressed the management of the department, and I said to them, we have to shape up, and I believe there will be. And I can assure parents that the learners that are within our institutions will try very hard to protect and care for them, but most importantly, provide quality education to them.
Yeah, you mean, you're absolutely right. I think, you know, even South Africans are becoming overwhelmed, really, by the number of student-related incidents, etc., etc. One that happened quite close around, when we just look at the timeline, quite close to around Enock's tragic passing, was that of Ekyamogetsu.
Yes.
You know, there have been a lot of questions around the circumstances surrounding that incident as well. What have you learned since then about, you know, the circumstances that led to his death? Because we heard that the school said there was a drowning, but there were also head injuries in the boy's body. What have you learned?
I received the report. We'll release the report next week.
Are you able to share what some of the contents of the report?
Not now, because it's not finalized. There are areas where we wanted the investigators to go back and get the relevant information, but they gave us a report, and that report will be released next week.
Okay, and I presume there will be clarity around the consultation with the family as well, because this has been a sticking issue with the situation. All right. Well, thank you very much for making time and for coming to answer some of these critical questions.